Hello and welcome to this webinar for years 10 and 11 for AQA's Power and Conflict Poetry Anthology. We're looking at My Last Duchess by Robert Browning, and we're hoping to understand structure, form and themes of the key ideas and messages, to understand the imagery and language in the poem, and to understand the context. Now, it's important to know that this is a dramatic monologue, which means it's a character speaking in role. It's written in iambic pentameter, so those very regular weak, strong, weak, strong, weak, strong, weak, strong, weak, strong rhythm. And it's written also in rhyming couplets. It's the voice of the main character, the Duke, and you can see, because it's written with such strict rhythm and strict rhyme, it's a man who very much likes to be in control. Now, he describes the painting of his dead wife. That's My Last Duchess, painted on the wall. It's a portrait of the dead Duchess, and this explores lots of ideas of power and control in marriage. Now, the Duke is speaking directly to a representative who's arranging a new marriage between the Duke and his master's daughter. And the Duke's possessive and controlling nature is very evident in this conversation, in this monologue that's supposed to be a dialogue. He says, "Since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I, even in death, he controls who has access to looking at the portrait of his dead Duchess." Now, we learn that the Duke is paranoid and untrusting. He says of his dead wife, she was too soon made glad, too easily impressed. He didn't like the fact that other people would impress her, other people would make her glad. And he also felt deeply ashamed of her flirtatious nature. She would smile at other men. She would be polite to other men. And it made him feel intensely ashamed and insecure. And his pride was such that he refused to tell her off. He refused to really stop her having access to other men. He said, "I choose never to stoop." Now, in the conversation, the Duke subtly admits that he had his wife killed because of her disrespect of his gift of a 900-year-old name. And he states, "I gave commands, then all smiles stopped altogether." The poem ends with a subtle warning for his intended bride. Now, there are all sorts of images throughout the poem that speak of the wife's innocence, but her flirtatious nature, and also about the fact that in marriage there was a power conflict, a power struggle. One quotation at the beginning that talks about how she accepted a gift of a bow of cherries from a servant and she smiled. So this natural imagery of the cherries shows something that's beautiful and fresh and delicious, but it's also perhaps suggesting two sides. Perhaps it's showing that flirtatious, openly sexualized nature, but perhaps it's also intensifying her innocence. The color symbolism of the white mule also perhaps signifies her innocence. It was white and therefore innocent, but mule, therefore it was stubborn. And the reference that's mythical, Neptune taming a seahorse, we can see that he's trying to assert his dominance as a god, as a sea god, Neptune, on this wild horse who are his wives or his women. And the compound noun, gift of a 100-year-old name, really signifies that sense of snobbery. He expects a particular amount of respect, not just because of his position of husband, but because his power and pride of having this aristocratic name that he has given to his wife. He expects her to conduct herself in a particular way because she's a duchess. Now, let's finally very quickly think about the context. Browning loved history. He loved European culture. When he heard this story about this real Duke, Alfonso II, he sets it in 1564 after the death of his first wife. Now, Alfonso's first wife was called Lucretia, and she was only 14 when he met her and 17 when she died. And he had two other wives. One other wife was also killed or died, and he went on to marry a third. So he's suspected of poisoning, although this has never been proved. Browning was a playwright, and so he adapted this monologue form where you talk to an audience. So he adapted the form for theatre into poetry. Now, he and his wife had their own personal experiences of overbearing patriarchs, these powerful male figures, and they had to conduct their courtship in secret. That means when they were going out together, they didn't tell anyone, because it had to be done in secret, because each of their fathers were powerful, dominating patriarchs like the Duke. I hope this has helped you to understand the poem a little better. Thank you for joining me, and goodbye.